She keeps it in a drawer. Not perfume, not a keepsake, her father's worn underwear. Several times a day, when the anxiety climbs high enough that nothing else touches it, she opens that drawer and she then, well, you just have to see it. This isn't a one-time thing. It's a routine built into her day like anyone else's coffee break. Except this is the thing that's supposed to calm her down. And by every account, it does. TLC's My Strange Addiction ran for years documenting people whose lives revolved around compulsions most viewers couldn't imagine. This is a closer look at some of the most extreme cases, not for shock value alone. When making this video, I wanted to try to actually understand what was driving the compulsion underneath it. It is fascinating to learn about these bizarre behaviors. Our minds are incredibly complex, and sometimes it compels people to do things that only they can truly understand. Okay, now let's get into our first story. Case 1, the scent of security. The woman in the opening wasn't diagnosed with anything exotic. What she was describing, using a specific familiar scent to regulate anxiety, sits close to something clinicians recognize as scent-based self-soothing, an offshoot of the same category of behavior as comfort objects. The unusual part isn't the mechanism, it's the source. She described her father's scent as the one thing that reliably brought her heart rate down when nothing else worked. Not therapy, not medication. However uncomfortable the specifics are to hear, the underlying logic is one trauma specialists actually recognize. The brain latching onto a single, intensely familiar sensory anchor because it associates that anchor with safety. In the episode, we see her confide in her best friend, who reasonably was shocked at first, but in the end said she would be there to support her friend. Then, the woman told her father the real reason so many pairs of his underwear had gone missing these past several years. Naturally, he was confused and shocked at this, and immediately told her to seek help. By the end of the episode, she does seek therapy, and we find out that she hasn't completely stopped this behavior, but is improving. She and her father's relationship is another thing she is working on, according to the show. Case 2, 100 cups. Most people top out at 2 or 3 cups of coffee before the jitters set in. 1. My Strange Addiction case featured a woman whose daily intake reportedly reached up to 100 cups, brewed continuously, cup after cup, from morning until she finally slept. At that volume, this isn't really about caffeine anymore. Behaviorally, cases like this track closer to compulsive oral fixation or ritual-based anxiety management than to a simple caffeine dependency. The cup itself and the constant motion of making and drinking it, functioning as the actual coping mechanism. The caffeine is almost incidental to the ritual. In this episode, we see a jittery woman constantly consuming cup after cup of coffee throughout the show. Her children are concerned about their mother's coffee intake affecting her health and convince her to see a doctor. At the doctor's office, she learns that she is far exceeding the recommended safe amount of coffee, which is 4 cups a day maximum. She also learns the dangers of high caffeine intake and how it can affect systems in her body, especially the heart and circulatory system. At the end, the show reports that she still drinks coffee, but has cut back and is working on cutting back more in the future. Case 3. Eating the furniture. He called it sponge. What he was actually eating was foam, cut from mattresses and couch cushions, chewed and swallowed in small pieces, repeatedly over years. This one sits squarely in a diagnosable category. Pica, a compulsion to eat non-food substances, most often linked to nutritional deficiencies, anxiety disorders or obsessive-compulsive patterns. What makes this specific case stand out, even within pica cases, is the material itself. Foam has no nutritional draw at all, which points toward the texture and chewing sensation being the actual target. not any craving for a missing nutrient. He claims to have consumed the equivalent of 1.5 to 2 entire couches worth of furniture sponge in his lifetime, often eating small chunks like bite-sized snacks. He is very selective, requiring the sponge to have a specific smell and texture. His addiction nearly required surgery after a severe blockage in his lower intestine. By the end of the episode, he is seeking help, but it is unclear whether or not he was able to stop the behavior for good. Case 4. The tanning booth. One of the show's more striking episodes featured a woman logging over 100 tanning sessions a month, well beyond what any dermatologist would consider safe. To the point of visible, lasting skin damage, she openly acknowledged on camera and continued anyway. We see her go to multiple tanning sessions a day, keeping her skin a dark shade that doesn't look natural. She is also seen lying out in the sun in her pool, costing her skin with baby oil to get maximum exposure. She is seen by a physician who tells her she is already showing visible signs of sun damage with wrinkles around her eyes and her hands resembling an old person's, in the young woman's words. She is currently not showing signs of skin cancer, but the doctor warns her she's at very high risk of developing it in the future if the excessive tanning continues. Clinically, this case tracks closest to a condition researchers call tanorexia, functionally similar to body dysmorphia, where the person's self-perception of their skin tone stays persistently out of step with reality, driving them to keep chasing a result they can't actually see accurately in the mirror. There's also a physiological piece worth mentioning. UV exposure triggers endorphin release, meaning the tanning itself became a mild chemical reward loop layered on top of the perception issue, which is part of why cases like this one proved so hard to interrupt, even after the health consequences became visible. Case 5, married to a doll.
She's not awake right now because, basically she kept hitting the snooze button, so it's just like, just let her sleep. It's not even worth getting her out of bed at this point.
One of the most bizarre episodes of the series would have to be this one. We are introduced to a man named Devakat who is in love with a life-sized silicone doll. Her name is Sidore Kuroneko, and he treats her just like a human partner. They share meals, watch TV, and even go out shopping for clothing together. He considered himself to be married to Sidore, and they wore matching engraved wedding bands. He claims to be fully aware that she is a synthetic object and identifies as an advocate for synthetic love, choosing his relationship with the doll over human partnerships. Many men who commit to doll relationships have experienced deep interpersonal trauma, such as a devastating divorce or severe infidelity. Psychoanalysts who study tech-supported relationships, like Dr. Danielle Canafo, note that dolls function as a perfect partner because they provide unconditional companionship. A synthetic partner will never criticize, lie, cheat, or abandon the individual. For someone with profound attachment wounds, the doll acts as a safe surrogate, where intimacy can be simulated without the risk of emotional pain. Case 6, her husband's urn. In one of the most shocking episodes of the entire series, we meet a woman named Cassie who had sadly lost her husband. Since his passing, she said she had become obsessed with carrying her husband's ashes around with her everywhere she goes. She then goes on to say that not only does she take his urn everywhere, but she also has been consuming her late husband's ashes. Doctors classified Casey's habit of eating her late husband's ashes as a traumatic compulsion stemming from raw, unfiltered grief. Because she was terrified of losing her physical connection to him, the act offered her a brief adrenaline rush of comfort. However, the show's medical professionals warned of the severe psychological toll and physical toxicity of consuming human cremains. The episode concluded with Casey checking into an inpatient mental health facility for structured supervision and treatment. These cases show us how extreme human behaviors can get, and that apparently almost anything can become an addiction. Moderation is key, so don't drink too much coffee and limit the amount of sponge and ashes you eat daily. actually, just don't eat sponges or ashes. Please. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time, stay safe out there, and as always, stay weird. I'll see you in the next one.